So we're starting with Kittens, and Scout is on my lap, and then we got Zelda here, chilling. Zelda's very interested in Samantha Bee, it seems. And yeah, I wanted to talk about this because, man, this video has generated so many thoughts that I have spent hours today. I've been trying for 2 hours now to try to pinpoint a coherent thought about what this video has kind of stirred up. And part of it is I think I've eaten too much damn Halloween candy because the kids in my neighborhood let me down this year, man. Halloween in the hood was serious. You went around, and if somebody just put out a bowl of candy and said, take candy, 2 hands, like just, wow, you took the biggest handful of candy you possibly could, and you put it in your bag, and you were happy. Because the opportunity exploited, right? That's what they tell you to do. Now that I live in this nice, very white, well, it's more Jewish neighborhood, the kids didn't take the candy. Kids came by. I mean, I was cleaning out my costume room. My husband was out, and so I was afraid because I was totally like barricaded in, so I couldn't get to the door. But I heard the dog barking. I knew people came by, but their parents, who of course are hovering over them like wardens the way they do now, probably only let them take 1 or 2 pieces of candy. Nah, man. If that bowl is there in plain sight, and it doesn't say, please take one, you encourage your children to exploit that to the maximum potential. You dump half that shit into your bag, but like, just take it all. No one's stopping you. It's not unethical to take more Halloween candy when it's just sitting right there. It's not like there's a ton of freaking kids on the street. I had tons more in the back because I assumed the people were going to be like little hood kids who were just going to take it, and so I'd refill it. It was fine. But no, mamby-pamby, wussy Halloween. Like, what is that? Then I realized kids probably don't give a damn about Halloween. They got everything here. It wasn't like us. We appreciated that candy, except for the the garbage candy. That old lady that always handed out like Kraft caramels, and she gave you like 1 or 2 like it was a big treat. Kraft caramels were never good. Never good. They were up there with Rockets and candy corn as garbage candies that no one really liked, but it becomes this like acceptable Halloween thing. Like, I think, you know, that kind of candy are relics from back in the day when it was, you know, the saltwater taffy down at the dry goods store. Sort of like pioneer times. That's when freaking caramel taffy was a bit like, nowadays, what? No, you buy quality Halloween candy. You get the good chocolate bars or the potato chips. Those are the best. Those are the best when I was a kid. Like, Halloween has changed, man. And it's made me think that mine might have been the last generation of kids who are not raised to be afraid of the world because it was more convenient for their parents if kids were terrified of going outside on their own. And how does this link to the Samantha Bee video? Well, it really doesn't. It explains why I'm wired on sugar. But here's the exchange, and it's right off the top. I want to play for you guys because it got me thinking about so many things. I don't know which ones to touch on. I could talk for about 2 hours about the stuff that this video opens up. So let me just play it, and then we'll discuss. Yeah, I'll play the whole thing instead of just stopping and starting because I hate that stop and start YouTube thing. Like, people miss the plot. So I'm gonna play the whole thing.
If and when Hillary is president, what do you think will be the female equivalent of "you weren't born in this country"?
That's an interesting question.
Thank you. I have a lot of those.
I think the equivalent will be she's tired, she's moody, she's being emotional,
There's just something about her.
There's something about her. When men are ambitious, it's just taken for granted. Well, of course they should be ambitious. When women are ambitious, why? That theme, I think, will continue throughout her presidency, and it's contributed to this notion that somehow she is hiding something.
Boom! Boom, right to the point of Hillary Clinton's biggest flaw. Good job, Obama. That was a very Obama answer. Obama answers always contain 3 answers, a minimum of 3 answers. But this was also very interesting because he started off with something that was easy and popular, which he does. I mean, moody, all that stuff, emotional. Nobody calls Hillary Clinton emotional. Quite the opposite. But that's going to appeal to that female voter, right? You know, that sounds to me more like Barack Obama talking about challenges his wife has faced, or perhaps even his daughters have faced as they get older, as opposed to Hillary. But then Samantha Bee did something that you're allowed to do on a comedy show, but you wouldn't be, it wouldn't be considered wise to do if you were just a news gatherer. She helped him with the answer. She says there's just something about her. And then he sort of seized on what I feel like he really wanted to say, which the big problem, the big thing that is going to dog Hillary Clinton is that she's hiding something. And it has to do with her ambition. And it is fair to say that she is criticized for having the ambition, because what's the central premise of the SNL parody? I'm going to be president. This fact that she wants to be president is somehow something that we should laugh at. Her bald ambition is something that is funny. And I've talked about this before, so let's move beyond that. The Samantha Bee thing about there's just something about her. Again, I think she was sharing a part of herself here. And this is something that every woman I know in the public eye deals with. There's just something about her. This is something that really cuts to sort of the core of that damage that gets inflicted in adolescence that stays with women our whole lives. And if you want more on that, read Rachel Simmons' Odd Girl Out and the Curse of the Good Girl. She gets into how girls are discouraged from speaking directly and authentically about their opinions and their viewpoints. I won't get into it now. If you want to hear more, let me know. I'll get into it more on Feedback Friday, but there's a lot more to unpack here. And I will say that this is something that much more affects white women than women in other communities. And I found it interesting that Ana Navarro on CNN couldn't relate to this in the same way. She's Latina, and it's true. I have been very fortunate to see 3 sides of this equation, because when I was a kid, I mostly had male friends. I had my one female friend, Vera Horseman, who was also a tomboy, and we liked to beat the crap out of each other playing Thundercats. And then I had my friend Aparna, who died when I was 6. She died in the Air India bombing. So half my female friend quotient died when I was 6. I had more boy interests. When you are interested in video games and superheroes and Dungeons and Dragons, you tend to have more male friends because you have more shared interests. Well, unfortunately, once you get to those tween years, grade 7, grade 8, that starts becoming harder to maintain. Adults are so terrified you're going to get pregnant and all that stuff. Oh my God, sex. That it's very hard to spend any friend time with boys. And so you end up hanging out with more girls. In my case, ones I didn't have a ton in common with. That's not true across the board, but they were complicated relationships, in part, I think, because I felt forced to hang out with people who did not have similar interests to me. I mean, Vampire the Masquerade was a nice equalizer because, oh, that's vampires, and, you know, they could understand that, but the type of game they wanted to play was completely different. And so my hobbies became private things, you know, like I'd play computer games at home, not around my friends. Or I'd play them with, you know, my boyfriend at the time. I remember a boyfriend I had, we'd rent the PlayStations and play through Resident Evil together. It was like a weekend session of just, oh yeah, it was cool. Spent the weekend with my boyfriend playing video games all weekend. But we had to return the game in 3 days, so we had to get through that damn game. And we wanted to play it more than once, right? Because you had Jill and then you had Chris, and you want to play through it both times. But I saw that there's just something about her at arm's length, and I'm very, very lucky in that regard. Because I think the only reason I'm able to take the public risks I do, and I'm able to express my opinion as well as I have, is because there was no dominant pressure. I mean, I saw that more in my dance classes, which were far more white than my school. Adolescent girls of color have very different issues. At least they did back then. There's been sort of a homogenizing since. But it is very different. It is a lot louder. It is a lot more serious. They will tell you what they think, and I prefer that. I want to know where someone's coming from, right? Whereas the more, you know, refined girls recognize that it's all about the person who has the most friends has the most potential allies and can spread the most crap about you. So the best way to collect a lot of friends is to not have firm opinions about anything. Because the minute you start having firm opinions about something, then people disagree with you. And if people disagree with you strongly enough, then they'll decide they don't like you. But they won't say they don't like you. And they won't state why. There's just something about her I can't stand. I hate her. Can't stand her. Can't stand the sound of her voice. Can't stand this. And I mean, let me tell you, it is a real education to see a men's rights group carrying on like that, which is an experience I had where they posted all these YouTube comments like just cutting me up. Oh my god, I can't stand her. The sound of her voice, the way, yeah, people just listen to her because she's pretty. Like they were carrying on like 8th graders because they couldn't argue the merits, but their identity politics would not allow them to go, all right, you know, this is somebody we're not going to attack. There's really nothing to attack here. It's a frustrating situation because it's led to this ongoing tension where people are like, debate these people, debate these men's rights people. And I'm like, first of all, I don't want to debate. I want to have a discussion. Second of all, gladly, if they apologize for the poor behavior. And then that's not going to happen. And they continue the poor behavior. So I don't talk, and I take the knock because I won't debate. I absolutely will debate. I just won't carry on like an 8th grade girl. I'm beyond that. and I don't want to go back in the gutter. But then you get that there's just something about her. Oh my God, I can't stand her. I don't think she's evil. I don't think she's a bad person, but she has these things that seem like stuff. Like you can create a conspiracy theory about anybody that way that is inherently disprovable. And all it is a discomfort with someone you can't just dismiss as completely off their nut, but who doesn't fit your ideological branding. It's this Hatfields and McCoys thing. That's a dated reference, right? It's like two warring tribes. It's what's like a gaming reference. It's like elves and dwarves for most of the time, but that's not even a good comparison because elves and dwarves is usually like the Gimli and the Legolas, but you know what I mean, right? There's just these factional enemies that are part of science and science fiction as far back as we can, we're aware of in our measly little lifetimes. And I won't be a part of that because I think it's really impacting our ability to get things done. I think that Obama himself fell prey to that because he was an absolute darling of the left. But he got into this he's not black enough thing among some activists. Because he wouldn't say certain words and he wouldn't say certain phrases and he wouldn't own his blackness. Meanwhile, he's got these damn birthers on the other side trying to discredit him anyway. And so I think that this is a tender situation for him. I mean, you see the anger in Michelle. I mean, I think part of the reason they are out fighting for Hillary Clinton so hard is that they know her, they've worked with her, they legitimately like and respect her. But they're angry. They're angry at the unfairness of all the birther stuff, and the guy who drove it for years is her opponent. And because of the racial stereotypes that Obama had to fight, he couldn't get angry the same way a Joe Biden could, the same way a Harry Reid could, the same way a Donald Trump can. Because then he's the angry black man, and then he's pigeonholed. And that's what's so frustrating. And this media narrative about Hillary Clinton's secrecy and high negatives. People get mad at me when I talk about this stuff and they say I have a pro-Clinton bias. But let me try this in another way and see if I can make sense to you guys here. It isn't about a pro-Clinton bias. It's about another rung in a very long ladder of the media setting the narrative of an election and then cherry picking points that feed into that narrative and dismissing ones that don't. And it happened to Mitt Romney, it happened to John McCain, it happened to Al Gore, it happened to John Kerry. I mean, the media does tend to pick winners in an election based on some pretty dumb stuff. And it basically comes down to who they like best. And they're really conflicted this time around because who they like best is Donald Trump. He's a clown. He's a buffoon. He gives good sound bites. He was available at the beginning. He liked to talk. He was, he liked press conferences. He loves the camera. And media loves a person who acknowledges them. Even though he bashes the press, they matter in his world. But they're having a really hard time defending that. And so they are very critical of him, but they're sneering all the way through it because while they disagree with him, well, they can quote chapter and verse all the reasons that he is a terrible candidate. And he is a terrible candidate. Whether you like his build the wall rhetoric and whether you're pro-life or whatever, whether you're pro-big business, whatever, he's a bad candidate. He's undisciplined, all that aside. But the media has disliked the Clintons. And not disliked, the media dehumanized the Clintons a really long time ago. And you have to remember, a lot of the people who are in high-ranking positions in the press now got their bona fides in the Clinton years. Wolf Blitzer, for instance, was senior White House correspondent at that time. Maureen Dowd, who is, to me, hands down the worst op-ed writer at the New York Times, has been coasting on the Pulitzer Prize she won by making Monica Lewinsky look like a cheap little slut and Hillary Clinton into the bitch. Like, I'm not kidding. So there is such a tension between the media and the Clintons that they can't find it. They are not capable of being objective, because if they actually rethink the approach they took to the whole thing in the 1990s, which looking back on it is horrific, you know, they'd have to really second guess a lot of their judgments and a lot of their instincts now. And so they find reasons to agree that, yes, you can't blame the wife for her husband's bad acts, and you can't do this and you can't do that, and they got all their liberal check marks there, but they have to find a way to stay intellectually consistent with the drubbing they gave her in the 90s. And this has caused a real problem for the press. And the way the press has solved this problem, at least the ones who have been around long enough to have this issue, is to go, there's just something about her. She's secretive. She's not trustworthy. She has high negatives. Saying someone has high negatives is the political equivalent of saying your kid is ugly. It's completely subjective. It drives me crazy when political pundits who have not been an average Main Street voter for a really long time talk about what voters want and what voters want to hear and what voters respond to. They are wrong. I mean, the public service Trump has provided is just proving all of that is nonsense. How voters made up their minds 4 years ago, 8 years ago, will not predict how voters will make up their minds now. And it's very true that certain voting blocks have been exceptionally taken for granted, not just by parties, but by the press. But let's look at this. Hillary Clinton is a very unpopular candidate. Both candidates are historically unpopular, because it's just another shade of, there's just something about her. And I'm doing that Valley Girl voice deliberately, because that's the framing. But this historically unpopular candidates, well, we are living in a time of very high polarization. Elections are close to begin with because the country, the U.S., is split fairly evenly between Republicans and Democrats. And all the humming and hawing and you know, soul searching and pearl clutching they do, they eventually come home. And that's why the polls are narrowing now. Unless another Trump tape comes forward. You see it if you actually look at the charts that Hillary Clinton has increasingly gained support. Trump is just coming back to where he was at around the convention. And so all that's left is these undecided voters. But there's another piece of that puzzle. There have been fractures within the traditional party lines that I think have been ignored too much in this election cycle, because there are what they call the establishment Democrats and the establishment Republicans, and then you have the outsiders. And the reason I sort of mock that is because the so-called outsiders decided to pick two candidates who, for very different reasons, are about as insider as they get. Hardcore leftists who wanted an outsider hung their hat on Bernie Sanders, a politician who is more of a career politician than Hillary Clinton. He's been around much longer. Just because he identifies as a democratic socialist doesn't change that. He's a democratic socialist who's pro-gun. That's a perfect candidate for Vermont. And then you've got Donald Trump, who is a guy born into wealth, has used his wealth to manipulate the system his entire life, to deny housing to black people, to make horrible comments about Mexican people, to make horrible comments about women, to claim that black men falsely accused of crimes who were exonerated with DNA evidence are still guilty because of a false confession. He is able to do all of this because he was rich out of the womb. That's your outsider? This has led, this Republican-Democrat divide, bisected with a elitist outsider divide, has led to these historically high negatives for these candidates without the candidates having to do anything. If you actually break down the numbers, it's patty cake, okay? The electorate's divided anyway. So you've got split it into the Republicans and the Democratic camps. You're looking at about 40% for each of them. Then you've got those 10 to 15% of never Trumpers within the Republicans who won't vote for Hillary, but won't vote for Trump. And then you've got those 10 to 15% of Democrats. It's closer to 10 with the Democrats. She has done a better job of bringing people back to the fold. But you have those, she's a warmonger, she's too close to Wall Street. You guys in gaming know who I'm talking about. You've all seen the picture with the signs, right? Yeah. Okay, those people that have been telling us how we've been womening wrong for years. Yeah, that type. Who will not vote for Hillary Clinton because it offends their liberal bona fides to do so. So they are either not voting or voting third party. So we're up to 50 to 55% for each candidate who are disliked because of tribal reasons. And then you've got the independents who are so put off from the ugliness, the attacks, the grotesquerie of this election cycle that they just go as a self-defense mechanism. I don't like either of them. Split that down the middle. You've got those 60%, 70% negative opinion statistics. Simple. Without them doing a thing as people. These numbers make sense. But the news isn't breaking these numbers down for people because they'd have to confront their own biases to do that. And so it's left to cable comedians to sort out the mess for everyone. And I personally think that that's a blessing for Hillary Clinton. I think that because so many of them are liberal leaning, she's got an edge there, but that doesn't change the fact that the news media has really let the public down this cycle. They have engaged in false equivalencies, and that's before this other lunacy with the FBI and all this stuff. And the last thing a TV news person wants to be is out of control, because there's so much going on. There's so many people talking in your ear. There is so much stimulus that if you feel like you don't have your footing, it is very disturbing. But I want to be clear again. I'll probably do a video on the original topic I wanted to deal with, which was lock her up and the gender gap with prison sentences. I think that's interesting, and that came out of this as well. But I'll leave that for tomorrow, because I want to make this point even before I get there. I want to be clear. I don't care who you guys vote for. The right to vote for the candidate of your choice is a very important freedom that people should not take lightly. And people have accused me of having a pro-Clinton bias and everything like that, and that's just... Guys, you're implying I should defend a guy who said he can grab women by the pussy. Like, come on! It's not a question of bias. It's just a question of, holy crap. But that has led to a real concern of mine about the quality of news and the quality of information that people receive when they consume news, either through a single source or strictly through alternative sources. Because as frustrating as mainstream news is, they are held to some standards of accountability that alternative news sites are not, and you have to keep that in mind. So all I care about, for the record, is that people are making an informed vote. And informed votes don't feel good. They're hard. Trust me. I've struggled with ballots even up here. If anybody's concerned, we have the luxury in Canada of just voting local, because we don't vote for our prime minister directly. So it's great. It's so much easier. We don't have to split ballots. We don't have any of that. Our voting system is awesome. We have multiple parties, and we only vote for one person federally. We vote for school trustees and things like that, but I actually pay somewhat more attention to that. But I tend to vote for the candidate who I think is going to do the best job. It failed this time because our local candidate ended up as a high-ranking cabinet minister. Oh boy, he's been very busy. But you guys in the US have a 3-level, very difficult choice. And all I care about is that you take your vote seriously and you vote. First of all, not voting unless you're like really sick or, literally have to work that day, but with early voting, you can do it. Vote, please, vote. Because that's very important. But vote informed. And you can still get informed. You can still learn about the issues and learn about how government functions and the fact that it's going to be a very challenging time no matter who gets elected, and no matter who gets elected, I mean the Senate and the presidency. Congress is not flipping. I'd be very surprised. But my role here is to inform you guys of workings of the press using examples that you can relate to. It is not to tell you how to vote. It is not to push my personal opinion of the candidates on you guys. It is to show the levers of media that I am fortunate enough to be aware of, because I spent way too long getting the shit kicked out of me by the levers of traditional media. And if I can make something good out of that and inform you guys based on that, I'm going to do it. And I'm going to stop there for today. I hope you watch tomorrow as well, because it's a really interesting subject. I just started researching it today. I had no idea how complicated the issue actually is, but we're almost done this election. I will have updates for you on other more gaming related stuff on Friday. But thanks for watching, and please don't freak out. Like, seriously, please don't freak out. Don't go off the deep end and start making crazy accusations, and like, just breathe, please.